Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I hope your wealth and your health are intact, and I hope you have some people who care about you. In this video, I will be getting into 13 points regarding the Epstein files. These are things that I have accumulated, sort of a miscellaneous collection of things that I think need much more attention than they are currently receiving. I think each and every one of these is honestly just another window, a small one, some larger than others though, into the grotesque evil that is our elite and leading class. And it's very, very concerning to me. Without further ado, I'm going to get into this here. And we're going to start off with point number 1, which is about a guy named Richard Branson. Now, if you don't know who Richard Branson is, he is a billionaire. He owns kind of like a conglomerate corporation that is into all kinds of different things. You have Virgin Airlines, you have Virgin Mobile, basically all of his little corporations. And I think we're about to see some information that may allow us to guess why he went with that word out of every other word in the English language. So the first file I want to bring your attention to is right here. On September 11th, 2013, we see Jeffrey Epstein sent an email to Richard Branson. He said, "Nice seeing you. Thanks for your hospitality." Because Epstein actually went onto Richard Branson's island, which I will talk more about in a minute. But Epstein also says, "I appreciate your public relations thoughts." So Richard Branson was helping Epstein repair his image because, as I'm sure you know, Epstein was convicted of child prostitution, a very fucking disgusting crime, in 2007, so 6 years prior to this. And what was it that Richard Branson said? Well, we can see that up here. He said, "I think if Bill Gates was willing to say that you've been a brilliant advisor to him, that you slipped up many years ago by sleeping with a 17-and-a-half-year-old woman
Bullshit.
and were punished for it, that you've more than learnt your lesson and have done nothing that's against the law since. And yes, as a single man, you seem to have a penchant for women, but there's nothing wrong with that." Anyway, something along those lines. So Richard Branson just concocted this big line of bullshit for Epstein to feed to the entire world through Bill Gates. And I think one important thing to remember about any of these conversations that I'm about to show you is that when Epstein or whoever else is mentioning other people and like these favors that that person may or may not do for them, there's obviously some reasoning that goes into this. Both Epstein and Richard Branson in this case believe it would be reasonable that Bill Gates would come out and feed the general public this big line of bullshit about Epstein sleeping with a 17-and-a-half-year-old woman, which we now know it was more along the lines of 40 plus 13 to 14-year-old little girls. And I'm pretty sure Richard Branson knows that because he says, anyway, something along those lines. This isn't something that's based in reality. He's making this up, and he knows it. He knows he's trying to help a pedophile move past his, PR disaster that is his felonies for prostituting children, which, of course, he should have had much more happen to him than that. But I honestly just find this fucking disgusting. So we have another billionaire here named Richard Branson, who is just a giant pedophile piece of shit. Because at this point, for me, anybody who's helping these people, anybody who's sympathizing with these people, I'm going to assume that they're also molesting children. I'm just going to assume that they're doing that too because I don't know how else you could be okay with this, ethically speaking, unless you were one of these people too, and you went through years and years and years of ethical dialogue in your own brain about it, and finally came to this point where you're okay with it. I don't really see how else that happens. But let me show you this now. This is where Richard Branson's island is. It's called Necker Island. And it's only about 36 miles if you circumvent the British Virgin Islands here, this massive island here. And of course, you have Little St. James down here in the bottom left. By boat, if you're going 45, 60 miles an hour, this is, half an hour to 45-minute boat trip between these islands. So these guys were very likely hanging out all the time with one another, as well as with many other people. One of which I'd like to bring up now because I didn't know this until I started doing some of my own research, But apparently, Obama really liked to go to Richard Branson's island. We have this email chain here that I was able to dig up where we see that the subject is regarding Obama being on Richard Branson's island, being on Neckar's Island. And this email chain is occurring between Kathryn Ruemmler. You may have heard of her. We're going to be talking about her in this video. She has her own point later on that's dedicated to her. We see that Epstein asked Kathryn Ruemmler. He says, "I wonder if POTUS went or stayed," in reference to Richard Branson's island for Obama. To which we see that Kathryn Ruemmler writes back, "I believe he is there." And so what you should know too about Kathryn Ruemmler, before we move on, is that she worked for Obama. She worked for him for about 4 or 5 years, and this may have actually been 3 days after he was technically no longer president. So it looks like the first thing that Obama actually decides to do is to hop over to Richard Branson's island. For God only knows what reason, right? I mean, what the fuck is he doing over there? This guy's obviously sympathetic to Epstein. He's got his own island down there. Potentially, Richard Branson's doing a lot of the same stuff with child trafficking. I don't know why Obama would have any business with a guy like that. But now let me circle back to Bill Gates, because we saw that Richard Branson and Bill Gates have some kind of relationship, and Epstein's involved, and Epstein and Richard Branson are trying to get Bill Gates to go out into the public view and repair Epstein's image. We have this between some person named Knevin, whatever the fuck this is, and Leslie Groff, where Leslie Groff is clarifying some things about a visit to Richard Branson's island. She says, "Hello, Karen and blank. Sorry to bother you. Jeffrey is asking if it would be okay to bring along Bill Gates' assistant, Boris Nikolic, and Jeffrey Epstein's assistant, blank, to the lunch tomorrow on Richard Branson's island. I do not have contacts for Branson. Might you be able to either pass along an assistant information to me or get this message to them? Would really appreciate the help. Thanks, Leslie." So Leslie Groff is scheduling this huge meeting. Apparently Bill Gates' assistant, Boris Nikolic, who also frequented Epstein's New York townhouse and at one point was named the executor for Epstein's entire estate, he'll be there, and one of Jeffrey Epstein's assistants will be there as well. So this makes me believe that Richard Branson, Bill Gates, and Epstein were all actually doing business with each other, because this isn't just them meeting up for lunch. This is their assistants. This is people who do things on their behalf. People that are employed to enact the will of Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Gates, who are now meeting with Richard Branson on his island. And since we're on the topic of Bill Gates, let's get into him real quick. I have some interesting stuff about him. This recently came up where we have a email between Jeffrey Epstein and somebody named Barry Josephson. But this Barry guy says this to Epstein. He says, "Also, I've been thinking a lot about that question you asked Bill Gates. How do we get rid of poor people as a whole? And I have an answer/comment regarding that for you. When can I call you today to discuss this?" So I'm wondering now, why would Jeffrey Epstein pose a question like this to Bill Gates? Saying, how do we get rid of poor people as a whole? Why would he say this? I'm not really understanding. Maybe we can get a clarification from Bill Gates about what that conversation was actually about and what they meant by this. Do they mean maybe we need to enrich everybody? Because that's not really what their behavior says, in my opinion. I think people like Bill Gates are trying to squeeze every last dime out of every single one of us. And now we're getting yet another vile and disgusting and contemptuous whiff of absolute pig shit here, with the kind of mentality that these elite motherfuckers are operating with, where they're having these conversations about getting rid of all the poor people. How do we get rid of poor people as a whole? Like, let's just do away with them. I don't know, is that what the AI stuff was for? Epstein was really into AI, of course. Bill Gates is really into AI. Bill Gates was really into pandemic research. He did all kinds of pandemic simulations immediately prior and leading up to the COVID pandemic starting in 2020. I've always thought that that was very suspicious because it was the same pandemic where they mandated vaccines and all kinds of other stuff, imposing complete authoritarianism on all of us, like some kind of trial run for depopulation. Super fucking weird shit, but now we're actually seeing here that yes, Bill Gates was talking about this kind of stuff. He was involved in conversations about this kind of shit. So in the spirit of pouring some gasoline on Bill Gates, let's just bring this file up again, where Epstein sent an email to himself. It was a draft message to Bill Gates, because they were having some kind of turmoil in their relationship. But at one point, Epstein says in this email that he plans to send to Bill Gates, he says, "To add insult to the injury, you then subsequently, with tears in your eyes, implore me to please delete the emails regarding your STD. Your request that I provide you antibiotics that you can surreptitiously give to Melinda and the description of your penis." So at some point, Bill Gates sent maybe a number of different emails, one of which regarded the STD that he caught. And we know for a fact he didn't catch it from his wife or the Russian bridge player that we know he had an affair with. So he must have caught it from somebody else, somebody maybe that Jeffrey Epstein knew very well, like a minor. Then at some point, it looks like he sent an email regarding antibiotics that Epstein could provide to him so that he could sneakily give it to his wife Melinda, because I guess he had an STD and he wanted to prevent his wife from getting an STD by secretly dosing her with antibiotics. And then at some point, it looks like Bill Gates sent Epstein an email where he's describing his penis to Epstein, and I don't understand. I think, seriously guys, these people are some of the weirdest, sickest, most depraved motherfucking pieces of shit on the entire planet. And it's just crazy to me how anybody can be rooting for any of the people involved in these files. And I'm going to show you more people because it just gets worse and worse. But this isn't even funny. I mean, I probably would have laughed at this a year ago, like, haha, Bill Gates describing his penis, getting STDs, and trying to dope Melinda with antibiotics. That's hilarious. This isn't funny anymore. With everything that we have going on in the world right now, I'm really starting to see the big picture, and I'm really starting to understand why we are all suffering so badly. These are the people that are leading our world, and they are so sick and mentally ill, it's not even funny. But before my head explodes, let's go on to the fourth point here, which regards a man named Noam Chomsky. You've probably heard of this guy. He's been around for a really long time. He's really old. But I wanted everybody to know something about Noam Chomsky, specifically one of the meetings that he had with Epstein, because Noam Chomsky has actually always been a huge cheerleader for Epstein. He used to fly on his planes and have meetings with him all the time. But in one particular instance, at some point in 2015 to 2016, we see that there was an alleged meeting that took place, according to Chomsky himself, he said this, that included Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Jeffrey Epstein for the expressed purpose of discussing geopolitics and more specifically, the Israel-Palestine relations. And not just the Israel-Palestine relations, but also how the Israel-Palestine relationship appears on the world stage. And let me show you potentially what is the aftermath of this meeting that I was able to find in the files. We have another piece of shit named Lawrence Krauss, who used to work at the Arizona State University here in my home state of Arizona. We'll talk more about him in a second here. But we see that Lawrence Krauss at one point was inquiring to a dinner that he had between Noam Chomsky and Ehud Barak. This may have been the meeting where they were discussing the Palestine and Israel relationship. But Lawrence Krauss says, "So happy you will be there then. How was dinner with Noam and Ehud Barak?" And Epstein replies, "Amazing." So for some reason, it was amazing. But then we scroll up a little bit more and we see that Lawrence Krauss says, "I wish I had been there. Who won? Did they finally agree?" And I'm wondering if there was some debate regarding the Israel-Palestine thing that Noam Chomsky and Ehud Barak didn't really agree on. And maybe at this dinner, they were trying to figure out who was right. But we see that Epstein gets back and he says they agreed on many things. To which Lawrence Krauss replies, finally, as two reasonable and intelligent people would. And so I really wanted to include this point because it shows us just how involved Epstein was in all of the things that are now, today, huge fucking problems. This whole thing with Israel and Palestine, this has been a topic of discussion, and there's likely been a lot of discussion about personal advantages and personal gain from this elite class of pedophiles when it comes to the conflict between Israel and Palestine. It seems like there are tons of people, of course, on the side of Israel here in the Epstein story, but there are also potentially some people on the side of Palestine, and it's like they're trying to work out some kind of a backroom deal regarding the fates of these two countries. And along with everything else that we've seen, and my personal belief that people like Donald Trump are currently being blackmailed for a number of very good reasons, I think it's important to put this out there and show everybody that yes, they're talking about all kinds of stuff like this in the background. They're literally going in and discussing the futures and fates of these different countries, and more specifically, the conflicts between them. And so before we move on to our fifth point here, I also just wanted to let you know why Lawrence Krauss is such a big piece of shit. And it's because the Arizona State University conducted an investigation into Krauss, not just because of the Epstein ordeal, but also because there were numerous claims that he had been doing stuff to people. And they found out that yes, Lawrence Krauss had a long history of sexual misconduct with females at the university. At one point, he grabbed a woman's breast, and at another point, he had told a woman that he should buy her some birth control so that he can spare himself the maternity leave from her getting pregnant, and all kinds of other really nasty stuff. And Lawrence Krauss has been a huge proponent of Epstein even after Epstein's death. He has remained a staunch supporter, saying people just misunderstand Epstein and that's about it. So fuck you, Lawrence Krauss. You can go burn in hell. But we're moving on to the fifth point now about a guy named Steve Bannon. This guy is a political activist who is a massive supporter of Trump. He has been for the last decade. He's a huge figure in the conservative space. But let me read you a little bit of this text chain between him and Jeffrey Epstein that we see here, in which Steve Bannon says something that's extremely disturbing. We see here that Epstein says, "If you like, I will invite the Ethiopians to the States. So much treachery, double dealing. Great film." Epstein then says, "I like the Steve of Arabia layered towels." I don't know what the fuck any of that means, other than, if you like, I will invite Ethiopians to the States. So for some reason, maybe Steve Bannon wants Epstein's to get some Ethiopians over to America. Who really knows? But this is what Steve Bannon says that is so concerning. Steve Bannon says, "I love it. Can I get a couple of the really pretty girls that they shoot afterwards?" Now, I covered this in my last video when I talked about all the guns that Epstein had, not just at Zorro Ranch, but also in his airplane hangar, in his New York townhouse. There's all kinds of permits and discussions about gun permits, as well as gun paraphernalia and specifically shotguns that show up in the files regarding all properties, like they need guns at all their properties. Epstein also was a huge proponent of guns himself. He tried to get his gun rights restored because he was a prohibited possessor as a felon after his 2007 child prostitution bullshit. And I think that's why I find this comment extremely concerning. What do you mean shooting girls? Steve Bannon wants a couple of girls that they're going to shoot afterwards. Does that mean they're going to, sexually abuse them and then execute them somewhere like Zorro Ranch or Little St. James Island and then dispose of their bodies? Is that what the sulfuric acid was for, the 55-gallon drums of sulfuric acid? Anyways, speculation. We see that Epstein replies with, "Next time, you will go with me. A totally different life-changing experience. When the aforementioned arrive, they immediately kiss your feet. In our case, it will mean lowering at least one pants leg to meet the other," which I don't really understand what that means, because I think these people talk in kind of coded language and they read between the lines a lot, and these conversations are also very fragmented in general. But I just thought this was extremely concerning. And of course, Steve Bannon used to be a huge cheerleader for Epstein as well. Just like Richard Branson, Steve Bannon also at one point went much further than just giving Epstein advice. He recorded like 6 or 7 hours of interviews with Epstein that were intended to make Epstein look like a very normal person. And at the beginning of the interview, Steve Bannon specifically said, "My voice is not going to be heard on this tape, correct? Nobody will know that it's me doing the interview, correct?" And then he specifically asks Epstein to repeat his questions after he asks them so that the viewers will know what question is being answered by Epstein so that they for sure don't hear Steve Bannon saying anything. Because Steve Bannon didn't want anyone knowing that he had been there with Epstein trying to do this. And so let me show you another thing too about Steve Bannon real quick here. We have this email chain in which Epstein says, "All the way in 2018, all good. Bannon with me." So this is now 10 years after Epstein's child prostitution felony in Florida. And at this point, March 19th, 2018, he's likely being investigated for his second arrest that will take place next year. And we see that Bannon is still hanging out with Epstein. Epstein is telling his brother, Mark, that Bannon is currently with him. And then we get into some other very concerning stuff here too regarding Donald Trump, who we will get to at the end of this video. But this is the email chain where we see that Epstein's brother Mark was asking Epstein himself about if Putin had the photos of Trump blowing Bubba. And now we know, of course, Bubba is Bill Clinton. And so this is just a really weird question, of course, to be asking of Epstein, whether Putin has photos of Trump sucking the dick of Bill Clinton. Pretty fucking weird, right? But then Epstein gives some credence to this even, and he says, and I thought I had Cirrus. And this is actually a real word. This isn't a typo. Cirrus means problems, issues, troubles. He's saying, I thought I had problems. Well, think about Trump having photos of him sucking Bill Clinton's dick out there. That's basically what he's saying. And then Epstein's brother, Mark, says, you and your boy Donnie can make a remake of the movie Get Hard. Obviously a innuendo, a reference to, an erection. To which Epstein ends the email chain by saying, you mean Donnie T, as in Donald Trump. Just another way to say Donald Trump. So it seems like they made up little names for Donald Trump just between the two of them, and that all of this stuff is potentially real. That Donald Trump has a huge problem and huge troubles because Putin has photos of him sucking Bill Clinton's dick, which would be concerning for more than one reason at this point, given everything that's going on. But now I want to move into yet another very disturbing aspect of the Epstein story, which is this email right here, in which we see that one of Epstein's employees at Zorro Ranch was saying some stuff about 2 dead girls who were buried at Zorro Ranch. This person says, what is damning about Jeffrey Epstein is yet to be written. Did you know somewhere in the hills outside the Zorro Ranch, 2 foreign girls, maybe Ethiopians? Are these the 2 foreign girls that Steve Bannon wanted, the pretty ones that they shoot afterwards? Were buried on orders of Jeffrey and Madam G. Both died by strangulation during rough fetish sex. Now, that's an excuse that we've seen in other places in the Epstein files. This whole, died during rough sex weird shit, right, is complete bullshit, and it's some kind of a cover story that they probably fed their employees to lessen the blow of their murders, right? But we have even more interesting information here. This person says, here are the video footage of Jeffrey Epstein. 1. Sex video with minor. 2. Threesomes video. 3. Threesomes video. 4. Underage girl sex video. Number 5. Underage girl Matthew Mellon video. So Matthew Mellon, this guy, I'll talk about him in a second. It sounds like he probably got caught on tape having sex with an underage girl. We see here number 6, underage girl rape fantasy video. Number 7, girl from Bay Area suicide attempt, confession to Madam G. Like some young girl was confessing that she had a suicide attempt at one point and was telling that to Ghislaine Maxwell for some reason, because that's who Madam G is. Alright, but let's back this up real quick and look at number 5 here, this line item. Underage girl Matthew Mellon video. Well, who is Matthew Mellon? He's a dead man. A year prior to that email, he actually died in Mexico. And this guy had a ton of money, of course. He was a huge crypto guy, apparently, and he had basically become a billionaire by getting extremely lucky. Very early on in the crypto space, Matthew Mellon had invested about $2 million into the cryptocurrency market, which eventually ended up being worth a whopping $1 billion, which is a 500x on $2 million. That's insane. But what it seems like is that at some point, soon after that, Matthew Mellon got involved with the circle of the elite and wasn't prepared for it. It looks like maybe he went to Zorro Ranch or somewhere else, probably Zorro Ranch, and molested an underage girl, and they got it on video. Approximately 7 minutes and 31 seconds of video, that is. And then only God knows what happened next, but I think they killed him down in Mexico. I mean, this just doesn't happen. You don't just have billionaires going down to Mexico and being murdered. And they tried to say that this was a drug thing, of course. He struggled with drug addiction, and a family representative said he died at a rehabilitation center in the Mexican coastal town of Cancun. Like, fucking bullshit. You're telling me he overdoses at a rehabilitation center down in Mexico? That doesn't make any fucking sense. No, for sure, this is just another casualty of the Epstein story. And if this guy really did molest an underage girl, of course, I don't give a shit. Fuck him. But this is showing us, guys, seriously, this is so bad. This is so fucking rotten. This elite circle of people who are running our lives, you and me, we're beholden to these people who are going out to ranches out in the middle of the New Mexico desert, molesting children, and then having some kind of back-end drama, and then they're killing each other over it. This is sick as fuck. This is disgusting, and it's no reason our country is going down the fucking toilet right now. But let's keep moving on, because I have more disgusting stuff to show you. Point number 7 here is going to be about the beef jerky situation. Now, this email in particular was the one that I saw that really set me off. People are saying, oh, jerky is code word for little kids' flesh or human flesh that they're eating. And I took it with a grain of salt initially until I saw this email, and then I found a few more that I'm about to show you. But we just have some logical inconsistencies here that don't make sense if they're talking about any kind of jerky. Not just beef jerky, but any kind. In this file, we have an email from a guy named Francis Derby, and he said, Jeffrey Epstein said he was going to start eating regular food again, so he might be eating less jerky. So first of all, why the fuck do you not consider jerky to be regular food? Why do you have to stop eating jerky to be eating regular food again? That doesn't make any sense. But what also doesn't make sense is that Francis Derby says that Epstein had 6 bags of it in the downstairs freezer for his next trip, and that it should be enough to get him through. Which, if you know anything about jerky or beef jerky or whatever, you don't have to freeze beef jerky. It just stays good at room temperature. That's the whole point of jerky. That's why they made it back in the day. It was a preserved food item that was shelf stable at room temperature just as is. So to me, this immediately, all this information right here in this one email says, they're not talking about regular jerky. They're talking about something else, and they don't want anyone else knowing what it is. But then we have more information. Let me show you this here. We have yet another instance where Epstein's assistant, Karina Shuliak, says, there is 1 bag of beef jerky in the fridge at 71st. Please get it. And also blank has more at her place. Please get it from her as well and bring it all with you. I suppose it needs to be in a cold insulated bag, right? So Karina doesn't even know how this jerky is supposed to be maintained while in transport. And whoever this is up here who's redacted says, a small insulated bag would be just fine. I wouldn't recommend checking it. No need for crazy amounts of ice. 1 should do. Which, if you ask me, it's like, come on, these people are adults. They know you don't need to freeze beef jerky. They know you don't need to put it in a bag with ice just to bring it from one place to the next. It doesn't make any sense. Like, obviously they're not talking about beef jerky. But if you want another piece of evidence that says they're not talking about beef jerky or any kind of normal animal meat or animal jerky that's been cured to be jerky, let me show you what else they were talking about when it comes to this jerky. Here we have an email from a guy named Steve Hansen to Jeffrey Epstein, in which he says, I knew it was in my suitcase, and then I thought maybe I left it at the beach, only to find the small plastic bag near my dog's bed. Hence, no beef jerky. I'll email Francis to make us more, as I need 6 to 8 ounces to send to the lab. And I'll forward Francis the info to send to the lab directly. So for some reason, in the Epstein files, Epstein and Steve Hansen and Karina and Francis Derby, they're talking about analyzing this jerky. And so here's a personal question to you. Have you ever thought of having a piece of beef jerky and sending it into a fucking laboratory to be analyzed? I mean, why not, right? Why not analyze some beef jerky? Why not pay a bunch of money to have some lab analyze it at the molecular level? I mean, come the fuck on. And then 10 days after this, in 2012, we see that Epstein was asking Hansen, did we analyze the jerky? Like, he really wants to know what's going on with this meat, with this jerky, and whether or not Steve Hansen actually did send it off to be analyzed, which I just find to be so fucking incredibly weird, man. Like, seriously, this is so weird. And Epstein actually, starts taking a tone with this guy, too. Let me show you up here. He says, we talked about this at the ranch. Why isn't it done? It's like, what do you mean? Why is it so important to have this jerky and to have it sent off to the lab? Guys, I really think they are talking about, human meat. Whether it's children's flesh, children's, muscle tissue, whatever the fuck it actually is. They're not talking about regular beef jerky. This is code for something really fucking gross. I'm actually pretty much convinced at this time that they were eating people, that they were eating human flesh, and that this is part of some sick fucking ritual that they all engage in for, I don't know, who knows why, right? These people are just so fucking sick in the head, which is really what I'm trying to communicate with this video. We have a serious problem with these people. They're mentally ill beyond mentally ill. They're so sick. It really is demonic what these people are doing. And there's so much evidence for that at this point. We gotta do something about this. But again, before I get on another tangent, let me keep going on here. We have point number 8. which is actually about one of the Rothschilds. That's right, we actually have some proof that they were getting involved with Epstein in some likely unsavory ways. And I say that because it looks like Ariane De Rothschild, one of the Rothschilds, actually paid Kathryn Ruemmler and Epstein quite a bit of money. Actually, millions of dollars. Here we see an email from Jeffrey Epstein to Ariane De Rothschild where he says, I think you will find that 45.5 penalty legal, this is $45.5 million for some legal penalty, and then in parentheses, Kathy plus Pillsbury around 10, me 25, all less than 80 is pretty good, where they are talking about millions of dollars. And Ariane replies with, yes, congratulations and giant thank you. I'm relieved that it's settled and over. Now we can start moving forward. But whatever little plan or scheme that they've concocted seems like it keeps moving forward. If we come up here, we see that Ariane says, external auditors just announcing that FINMA is requesting age limit. Hilarious. Ariane De Rothschild. Epstein writes back and he says, now wait until they read the statements of facts. To which Ariane replies, I'm sure they will find unacceptable wordings. So this to me just seems like some kind of a scheme that is being perpetrated by Epstein on behalf of one of the Rothschilds, a woman named Ariane, and Epstein is being paid a massive amount of money for this, of course, about $25 million, which in the grand scheme of things, like if you look at what he got from Leon Black, for example, which was around $170 million, it's not that much. And so what I'm wondering is what was so important that Ariane De Rothschild get Epstein to do for her for this kind of money? Just under $80 million. That's pretty good for whatever this is. Yeah, I don't know. That seems pretty sus to me. And so I would say that this is absolutely like a threshold here for some kind of illegal or criminal activity here with Jeffrey Epstein and one of the Rothschilds here in this file, because obviously they're concocting some kind of scheme together. And if you think this is a one-off thing, guess again. I didn't go through every single file, but her name, Ariane, comes up 7,787 times. And it's not somebody else because if you look up her full name, it comes up 4,504 times. So this Rothschild individual is in Epstein's life and the Epstein story in general for a long time. There is a hell of a lot going on between them, and someday I might go back and look through some of those things, but holy fuck, is that a lot of times to show up in the Epstein files. Usually the Rothschilds are a lot more sneaky and shadowy, but in this case, it looks like Ariane got caught up and there might be some more incriminating stuff in there for us to check out. But let's go ahead and move on to point number 9, where I'm talking about the leaders of the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, and more specifically, Mohammed bin Salman. I found this file basically when the files had just come out, and I was honestly shocked because I had known, and we had all known for some time that Epstein did have some pretty strong Middle East connections, but this file right here absolutely is the nail in the coffin for that. Because what this document is it's an offer to Jeffrey Epstein on behalf of a company called Jawbone Health, which is a health technology company, for Epstein to become senior advisor to the company. A very, very high up role, potentially just under these roles here that are held by these people. We have Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Sheikh Hamdan bin Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, holy shit, that's a mouthful, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and additional rulers and decision makers as requested are offered. Now, who are these people? Well, 2 of these guys are crown princes. One is Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates, and the other, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, is Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And then the other 2 are basically equivalent to president here in the United States. So they have political and cultural leaders, the highest positions in those countries, just like Epstein was tied in with the presidents and prime ministers of Israel and the leaders of many other countries, including our presidents. It looks like when it comes to the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, he was tied in all the way at the top with them too. And they were heavily involved with him, and they wanted him to be senior advisor to this company, I'm sure so that they could make tons of money as Epstein assisted the company with entering new geographic markets. So likely using his blackmail information, for example, on people in the United States to smooth over deals for them and make their company a shit ton of money. Typical Epstein stuff. But now let's get into one guy in particular on this list. Prince Mohammed bin Salman. This guy comes up a ton and for some reason is referenced by a number of other individuals in emails to Epstein. In this email, for example, Epstein is talking about Mohammed bin Salman with Steve Bannon. Again, Steve Bannon appearing in more text messages here. Apparently Bannon was really close with Epstein at one point. Epstein says, when I mentioned Summers, he's talking about Larry Summers, when I mentioned Summers' name to Mohammed bin Salman as an alternative to me, his face scrunched as if someone farted. To which Steve Bannon apparently thought was really funny. He says, LMAO. So it looks like Steve Bannon was well in the loop with whatever Epstein was doing with these Arabic leaders, specifically Mohammed bin Salman. We have another email here from Bill Gates' employee. You remember we just talked about Boris Nikolic going to Richard Branson's island with one of Jeffrey Epstein's assistants for some kind of a business lunch that was being set up by Leslie Groff and somebody else. But we see here that Epstein is talking to Boris Nikolic and he says something about Mohammed bin Salman here. He misspells salmon, but he says Sheikh Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince Saudi. Don't know what that means. Pretty fucking incoherent, but we know he's talking about Mohammed bin Salman. And why he's talking about Mohammed bin Salman with Boris Nikolic, who is an employee at this time for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in 2016, to me is just really fucking weird. Like, what the fuck does this have to do with anything? And then Boris Nikolic actually shoots an email back at Epstein with this link here. It says something like, Bill Gates helps launch Shaghaf Saudi's philanthropic fellowship program. So something about Bill Gates, probably the Melinda and Gates Foundation, and some kind of Saudi philanthropic fellowship program. I don't fucking know, man. That's obviously another topic for another day. There's probably something there. It's now a little triangle between Epstein, Mohammed bin Salman, and fucking Bill Gates. You know, at this point, you can kind of swap Mohammed bin Salman out for Richard Branson, for example, and you see all these little connections starting to form, and all these people trying to help a convicted pedophile named Jeffrey Epstein. And I just don't know why any of them would be doing this, but we have yet another person who was helping Epstein, who was mentioning Mohammed bin Salman. I mentioned her earlier, Kathryn Ruemmler. And for some reason, Kathryn Ruemmler decided to mention something about Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia was in a photograph obtained by the New York Times. So it just sounds like all these people that I'm mentioning in this video, they all know that Epstein has major ties to Saudi Arabia. And more specifically, Mohammed bin Salman, who, by the way, is the guy that we know for a fact, our CIA has said this, many intelligence agencies around the world have said this, Mohammed bin Salman is the guy who ordered the murder of a journalist who was criticizing the war between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, because Saudi Arabia is trying to exterminate and do regime change in Yemen, and this rebel group called the Houthis, you've probably heard of them, I guess they're getting in the way. And this whole war thing, it's like another forever war, and hundreds of thousands of people are starving and dying from starvation. It's disrupting the whole country of Yemen. And as it turns out, Donald Trump is supporting that and sending U.S. aid to Saudi Arabia for that express purpose, despite everyone around him telling him not to do it, just like with the Iran thing now, just like with the Israel thing when that started off after October 7th, and everything that we've done since then, including Operation Midnight fucking Hammer. And so we're really starting to just see this massive wad of fucking dog shit that is all these people and Trump and all this blackmail stuff and this giant cancer tumor and all the little connections within it. And it's, God, I'm telling you guys, it's fucking killing our country. It's fucking killing us, man. We're being drained. We're being completely consumed by these fucking people, which is why it's so important and which is why I am making this video. But like I said earlier, we were going to talk about Kathryn Ruemmler specifically, which brings us into our 10th point here. Because through Kathryn Ruemmler, it appears that maybe Obama was involved, and we know that Epstein knew that Obama was at Richard Branson's island. So here's just yet another connection piece here, another wire connecting this giant shit tumor thing. Epstein says, you need to talk to boss. And he's saying this to Kathryn Ruemmler. And Kathryn Ruemmler shoots back with, agreed, but I need to be prepared to say yes before I talk to him. So they're talking about something. Epstein wants Kathryn Ruemmler to go to Obama about something because at this point in September 19th of 2014, she is working for Obama. Or she very recently stopped working for Obama in an official capacity, but kept working for him on the side. And to that, Epstein replies, understood. It comes down to high risk, high reward, low risk, low reward, professional, emotional, and financial. More Jeffrey Epstein word salad, r/I am very smart shit from Epstein. But then we see just another really concerning message here where Kathryn Ruemmler says most girls do not have to worry about this crap, which is not the concerning part. The concerning part is Epstein says this to Kathryn Ruemmler in response. He says, girls, careful, I will renew an old habit. Which right there, okay, that's fucking disgusting, dude. We all know that you got hit with child prostitution. And Kathryn Ruemmler doesn't say anything about that. So that tells me that Kathryn Ruemmler absolutely knew what Epstein was and what he was getting up to, and just continued this relationship regardless. Kathryn Ruemmler absolutely did not care. And now let me show you why maybe she didn't care so much. It's because she was receiving all kinds of payment and gifts from her wonderful Uncle Jeffrey. In this email chain, we see that Leslie Groff is scheduling some kind of a drop-off for presents for Kathryn Ruemmler from Epstein. Leslie Groff says, hello, Kathy. I wanted you to know that Jeffrey is sending a couple things to your New York apartment. Jojo is on his way to you now. He can leave with your doorman. Are you home? Kathryn Ruemmler responds with, I am indeed. Thanks, Leslie. And Leslie says, Jojo says he has made the delivery. And Kathryn Ruemmler says he has. So lovely and thoughtful. Thank you to Uncle Jeffrey. So to no surprise, Kathryn Ruemmler, who is still hanging out with Epstein well into the investigation period for what will result in his arrest in the following year in 2019, is receiving payment and gifts from Epstein for some kind of work or some kind of benefit from her, likely her connection to Obama. Here she is, just for proof. This is her on the left here, Kathryn Ruemmler, sitting directly next to Barack Obama. They were very close. She worked for him for years. They were in contact with one another every single day for all those years. And so, yes, that's very likely why Epstein needed Kathryn Ruemmler in her life. And I want to include this too before we move on. But yeah, Kathryn Ruemmler thought of Epstein as like an older brother. She says, well, I adore him. It's like having another older brother. And she was responding to Leslie Groff's comment of, oh, but you do. He considers you a very good friend. That is all he wants. So they had a very cordial relationship and a very mutually beneficial relationship for years. As you can see, this is 2015. Kathryn Ruemmler was talking to Epstein all the way up until 2019. So they knew each other for years, and this was likely Epstein's pipeline to Barack Obama while he was president. And now we also know that Epstein was aware that Barack Obama would be at Richard Branson's island, a guy who is very likely also a pedophile or a pedophile sympathizer. And so with Kathryn Ruemmler, we just reveal more of the tumor that is growing within the heart of our society. But anyways, let's go ahead and move on now to number 11. I'm going to incorporate Benjamin Netanyahu into this video. I have this very interesting email here. So at some point between 2013 and 2014, we've known for some time that Epstein set up a meeting between pedophile Jess Staley, who's the guy who was watching the sexual abuse of children at Epstein's properties and not doing anything about it. He's the JP Morgan guy. Epstein was able to set up a meeting between Jess Staley, who's that guy, and Benjamin Netanyahu, who of course is now the Prime Minister of Israel, who appears to be evading charges of corruption by keeping an infinite war going in the Middle East with every fucking country around them. But in this email chain, we see it starts with a guy named Jacob Frenkel. Haven't looked into him yet. I'm sure he's, some big piece of shit too. But he emails Jess Staley. He says, Jess, I found this photo from our visit with Bibi Netanyahu. Regards, Jacob. And then Jess Staley says, okay, that's cool. I'm going to go ahead and forward that to Jeffrey Epstein because I'm so appreciative of that meeting that he got me with Benjamin Netanyahu. And he says, I hope the ranch is fun. Great weather out here in the Hamptons. Operation on my shoulder on Tuesday. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about, but he forwards this whole thing to Epstein, of course. And this just confirms that that meeting absolutely happened. And that this guy, Jacob Frenkel, also tagged along with Jess Staley to go meet with Benjamin Netanyahu. So it will be interesting to find out who this guy is. Now you might be thinking, damn man, wouldn't it be great to have this photo? I mean, apparently this is potentially Jess Staley, this guy Jacob, and Benjamin Netanyahu all standing together. It would be great, wouldn't it, to have this image of Benjamin Netanyahu sitting next to one of Epstein's best friends, who is also a known fucking pedophile? And well, we might be in luck because I did decide to go ahead and submit a FOIA request for this. I said, this file presents an email chain which is initiated by an individual named Jacob Frankel. In Jacob's email, which was sent to a man named Jess Staley, a redacted image is located directly beneath the lines, which read, "I found this photo from our visit with Bibi." It's just the stuff I just read. So I absolutely did just file a FOIA request. And I did that a couple days ago, and I expect to hear back within 33 days, and I'd really like to see what kind of excuse they come up with, or if they just give me the photo outright. So if you want to see potentially an image of Jess Staley and Benjamin Netanyahu, stick around, because in whatever form they put it out there, I'm going to make sure to post it here. So stay tuned for that. But now let's move on to our next subject here, our 12th point, which is about Nadia Marcinkova. Of course, Nadia Marcinkova has been missing as of January 2024. She was either spooked by all the Epstein shit that was coming out, or somebody just decided to whack her. But I wanted to include this because I've been seeing a lot of people out there talk about some of these co-conspirators like they're victims. And they're not. They helped Jeffrey Epstein victimize over 1,000 women, as far as we know, potentially more. They may have been involved in the murder and the cover-ups of Epstein's crimes and helping him abuse more and more women. So regardless of how they got involved, over decades, they never did the right thing. And this email from Nadia Marcinkova to Jeffrey Epstein reveals their true mentality, or it does at least for Nadia. Here she says, "You act as if honoring your financial commitment would affect you in any way. It is very hurtful that you continue to make a conscious decision to make my life more stressful and difficult simply to prove some point. It's me. You were the one person I could trust since I was 18. That's funny. Trust Epstein? Anyways, I made decisions about my future and security based on your assurances, and now all of the promises are forgotten and you do this. Just because you can. It is such a betrayal of trust. I can't imagine what you are thinking. I gave you no reason not to treat me with kindness, and making me jump through hoops is completely uncalled for." So she's just bitching him out here. She has nothing to say about the fact that he's a pedophile, that he's molesting women. That whole paragraph is just a complete and utter guilt trip. She's saying, "You have made my life very hard," and she is basically putting Epstein up on a tee so that she can hit him with this next paragraph where she says, "You talk about my ability to make money? What money? I can make $5 sitting on the sidewalk. Is that making money? Your press didn't affect my ability to make minimal income. It just ensured that whatever I do can never lead to substantial success. So what is it worth to live that life? That cap is not worth twice a salary. It's worth millions. I am not one of your incapable bimbos. I could have worthwhile career prospects, which I now can't pursue. Not only do I have to deal with people calling me a child molester, which affects me greatly, but I am also unable to make money doing these things I enjoy, the things I do well, and which would result in high earnings. There is a cap on my success forever, and I even have to argue my point." So now she smacks Epstein down, and she says, "I can't make money because of you." And she even acknowledges that people are now calling her a child molester, something that she doesn't say that she doesn't understand. She's not like, "Oh, they're calling me a child molester now, and I don't know why." No, she knows why. She knows it's because she just got done serving the world's biggest fucking pedophile for like 10 years. And I think it's very interesting too when she says, "I am not one of your incapable bimbos." Is she referring to Epstein's victims by chance? I'm not one of your incapable bimbos, like the girls that go out and recruit other girls, like the 14 and 15-year-olds that got coerced and threatened by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein to go get more girls or we'll do something terrible to you. I mean, seriously, this is not a good look for Nadia here. She's obviously just trying to guilt trip Epstein and just trying to get him to shell out some dough, which is what Epstein kind of hints at in the message that got Nadia to explode like this. Epstein says, "100K, are we then done?" And so that's really all it's about here. And I can prove that because if we could look further into this email chain, we would see that they agreed that 100K would be good for Nadia to go away. She did get her 100K because as you can see here where it says income from the U.S. enterprise Aviloop, which is Nadia's company, well, that's where the payment actually ended up getting delivered. As we see here, it was about 10 days later, on the 16th, that Aviloop received a payment from Jeffrey Epstein for $100,000. You can also see, of course, that there's a lot of other payments that amounted to about $45,000. But it was just after that email where Epstein's like, I want to cut off contact. Is $100K enough? Well, apparently it was, because that's what they agreed on, and Aviloop got $100,000, which was Nadia Marcinkova's company. By the way, you can look that up on YouTube, and what you'll find is basically another front for some kind of sex trafficking operation. It's super weird. They have girls dressed up in retro flight attendant uniforms saying all kinds of weird stuff about, you want to fly big boy airplanes? Let's go, Captain. All kinds of weird ass shit, because these people are just fucking weirdos, and Nadia Marcinkova was no different. And with that, we're going to move on to our final point here. Big Lucky 13, and who's number 13? Donald fucking Trump. That's right. I just had to include these files because they came out recently, and they were some of the files that actually ended up getting taken down, likely because Trump was mentioned doing so many fucking terrible things. But what these files are documents from the FBI regarding sworn testimony of some of Epstein's victims, specifically victims that were trafficked to Donald Trump. In this document in particular, we have the accusation that this girl was forced to perform oral sex on President Trump approximately 35 years ago in the state of New Jersey, which is somewhere we know Trump went through the flight logs with Epstein. They flew frequently in and out of Teterboro, which is one of the cities in New Jersey. But this document goes on to say that the friend stated that she was approximately 13 to 14 years of age when this occurred. The friend allegedly bit President Trump while performing oral sex and described his heavy breathing. The friend was allegedly hit in the face after she laughed about biting him. And holy fucking shit, is that a toxic accusation. Holy fuck. And I just think about every single thing Trump and Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and every other person in Trump's administration has done to keep this from coming out. And I don't know, man, like that, all that makes me think that it's true. Like, they're not lying and covering this up because there's some nasty allegations, which Trump is no stranger to, by the way. He has, like, you can go on Wikipedia, he's got like 30 different sexual misconduct and sexual abuse allegations, some of which, by the way, like in the case of Stormy Daniels, another anonymous girl, and some lady named Jean Carroll, he's successfully been sued by those women. He's no stranger to sexual abuse allegations. And why he's trying so hard to keep these under the rug is very concerning to me, because if I were him at this point, I would just let it fly out there and say like, oh, it's just another one of those bullshit accusations. But no, he's literally got his lieutenants like Kash Patel and Pam Bondi committing fucking perjury, like straight up perjury. They should be getting charged right now to keep this kind of stuff under the rug, which to me is just further proof that he actually did this shit. But let me show you another document that they, well, re-released or restored or something. It's also from the FBI. In this document, Trump is mentioned 18 times. And in this particular excerpt, we see that it says, Trump asked everyone to leave the room. Trump mentioned something to the effect of, let me teach you how little girls are supposed to be. Trump unzipped his pants and put blank head down to his penis, bit the shit out of it. Trump struck blank and said, words to the effect of, get this little bitch the hell out of here. Blank advised she bit Trump's penis because he disgusted her. He had money. It reeked off of him. I'm not going to read the rest. It's fucking disgusting, dude. It's really fucking disgusting, and it's not funny because this is the man who is leading our fucking country. And in my next video, I already have a video about the blackmail situation, but I'm going to make another one because this whole shit with Iran and Israel and everything like that, to me, it screams I'm being blackmailed, and so I'm going to do what's in the worst interest of my country so that I personally don't get prosecuted by my own people. But I am going to be making another video on how we know that Epstein absolutely collected and sold or sent blackmail material to foreign countries. But holy fucking shit, guys, just think about this, like how hard they have tried to keep this from coming out. This is fucking disgusting stuff, and it just goes on and on and on. Like, his name is in here so many times, okay? And so let me go ahead, I'm just going to put this image up here while I go ahead and give my ending remarks here. Yeah, these people are some of the most disgusting, the weirdest, most depraved, most mentally ill motherfuckers on our entire planet. They're probably doing drugs. They're probably molesting children. They're probably torturing and murdering people. There's a lot of that in the Epstein files. We need to get rid of these people. We have a criminal class of people, the elites. They are criminals. They are driving us all into poverty and destitution, and they are ruining our fucking lives. I'm telling you, something is wrong with these people. Can you even relate to any of these people? Can you relate to their levels of greed, to their levels of decadence, to their levels of degeneracy and depravity? Or do you think that they're like aliens to you? Because that's what it feels like to me. I wouldn't be surprised if these people are fucking skin suits for some kind of reptilians at this point. These people are so fucked up. To me, this is like inhuman levels of sin and debauchery. It doesn't make any sense to me, man. Like, why would you even want to live a life like this? And now we're seeing that, yes, they are all connected. They do this red versus blue stuff out in the world, where one side is for minorities and socialism and whatever else, and the other side is for traditionalism and capitalism and all these other, social, political issues. But in the background, they're all fucking the same person. These people are all the same people. They're one big group. They all go to the same islands together. They send their kids to the same schools. They don't give a shit about the stuff that they tell you and I that they care about. They just do that so that they can get what they want, and then they'll keep going to Richard Branson's island, man. They'll keep going to Epstein's island, man. They'll keep doing whatever the fuck they want to do. They'll drink their grape soda, they'll eat their pizza, their beef jerky, and they'll keep fucking you in the ass in every single way until they've taken everything from you so that they can continue to do it. Think about that. That's where I'm going to end the video. Thank you for watching as always, and I'll see you in the next one.